Thank you very much. Okay. So good morning, everybody. If I didn't say your name, then it's a blanket hello, and I'm so happy to see you again. This is my Zoom family, and I am going to, after next week, I'm going to miss you terribly. So I'm going to start some more webinars pretty soon. I will, thanks for joining us again for this session. Elderly Affairs Division, Resources and Programs Supporting Kapuna and Caregivers. So it's bound to be a wonderful presentation for you, for everybody. You guys, everybody's met me before. I'm Kathy White, founder and president of Hau'oli, and that's all I'm going to say about myself. I will tell you that my disclaimer is that this series of workshops is made possible with generous support from the City and County of Honolulu. Thank you, Joel. And the May Templeton Hopper Fund and Theodore A. Vieira Fund from the Hawaii Hawaii Community Foundation. I've listed our sponsors that have given us support by offering resource materials that will be sent to you. That's their support for us and for you. The recordings of all sessions I've told you before are on my website at www.hau'olihawaii.org. Oops, I'm still admitting. Here we go. Everybody's muted except the speakers and myself. You know that if you need to ask a question, please go to the bottom of your screen that says where the chat room is, type your question, and at the end of the presentation, I'll read them to the speakers and they'll answer them for you. And again, I tell you this every week, because the presentation is brought to you by a grant, the pre-test, post-test, and evaluation forms are very important, and I have to send all that information to the grant people after the programs are over, so please fill them out. And thank you to the several people have finished the pre-test already, so that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And as I say every week also, I'll be sending you resource materials from all of our sponsors, including the Elderly Affairs Division. But I have to have your complete name and address, and I still have only first names or only last names and no address and just email. So if you're interested in getting all the resource materials, please make sure you registered completely. And that's all I'm going to say, because we have a wonderful program for you. Derek Ariyoshi and Joel Nakamura were sent to you, I'm sorry, the bios for these two wonderful guys was sent to you on Thursday with the package. And I have the pleasure of working with both of them in with issues concerning Kapuna and their caregivers. The information they're sharing with you today is going to be amazing, and you will get a lot out of it. So ask questions, and you'll get your answers if they don't cover them in their presentation. So Joel and Derek, take it away.
We appreciate it, Kathy. I'm going to make you squirm a little first, though, Kathy, because it's not in your style to speak about yourself. So I'm going to take this opportunity right now and thank you for being just an incredibly amazing advocate for our seniors and caregivers. So in this series of workshops, I'm sure that you've gotten to know Kathy, but I think what you folks need to know too is all the hard work behind the scenes that she is advocating on your behalf and the community's behalf. So she's a tireless advocate. So thank you, Kathy, for all the work that you're supporting. I would absolutely. And I would say this to our group, to our community, that you folks know this. These are challenging times right now, and it's made evident even more so now, the need for collective support for our community. And I would say this, what we need to be mindful of is that there's no amount of funds, no amount of programs, whether it be private, government, nonprofit, that can adequately support all individuals, all populations, and all families. We need to come together and really, as a family, as a community, to best serve everyone. And I think that's what's Kathy's big role in all of this is that sharing information, and in that information, we and you can advocate for yourselves. So Joe, next slide, please.
Your screen isn't on.
Yeah. Actually, I want to double up on that also and thank Kathy for all of your hard work and support for the community because years ago when we had to implement Kupuna Caregiver, you're only one of two people that responded to my inquiries as far as trying to set up recommendations and things like that. So, and I know you've been active with the legislature promoting the program, so I don't think Kupuna Caregiver would be where it is without your support.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you. And then because our topic usually is kind of boring because we're government, so I wanted to share a little joke because everybody knows humor is good for healing and especially for caregivers who are very stressed. So I'll just go to my joke really quickly. So a young man was walking through a supermarket to pick up a few things when he noticed an elderly lady following him around. Thinking nothing of it, he ignored her and continued on. So finally, as he approached the checkout line, the woman stepped up in front of him. "Pardon me," she said. "I'm sorry if my staring has made you feel uncomfortable. It's just that you look so much like my son who died recently." "I'm so sorry," replied the young man. Feeling bad for the elder woman, he asked, "Is there anything I can do for you?" "Yes," she said. "When I leave the store, could you say goodbye, mother? It would make me feel so much better." "Sure," answered the young man. It was the least he could do for the poor old woman, he thought. As the elderly woman was leaving after buying her items, he called out with a big smile, "Goodbye, mother." The old woman smiled back and waved as she exited the store. He then stepped up to the checkout counter and waited for the cashier to scan his few items. Shortly after, the cashier said, "That'll be $127.50. He said, "How can that be? I only purchased a few things." The cashier, looking confused and pointing towards the exit, said, "Your mother said you would pay for her."
I have to try that.
Okay.
Kathy and audience, you folks should know that's the first time I've ever heard Joe tell a joke. So you folks. Okay, thank you, Joe. Okay, so question to all of you. Who are our elderly? And what age do you become a senior? 50 years old to become eligible for AARP, 55 for Parks and Recreation Senior Clubs and RSVP program, 60 to be eligible for EAD services, 62 for many of our senior housing properties, and 65 for Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and SSI. And I am going to ask the group and maybe in chat function, truly, my mother wants to know McDonald's, what I really don't know and I should, McDonald's age for senior discount.
I think it's 55.
Sure.
Is it? Joe's right, 55. Mary, thank you. We'll do one more. Zippy's discount card, senior discount card.
65, 62.
No one knows.
Nope.
Okay, we're gonna have to research that one, Joe. But really, the point being, everyone, is that really age is but a number, and it only becomes relevant in regards to what programs and services that you are needing and wanting to access. And I think that's where Kathy and these lecture series are important, is being knowledgeable on the eligibility criteria, because that really is the only time that age is relevant, especially with our medical advances now, and age-related ailments, affect people differently at different ages. So, for EAD, we have clients ranging and starting from 60, and centenarians, a good number of them, including our adult daycare services. So it really runs the spectrum. Next slide, Joe. Now, who are our family givers, family caregivers? Anyone that informally or periodically helps someone else, a loved one. They are not paid. Formally arranged live-in caregiver, could be a spouse, could be a parent, sibling, children, grandchildren, friend, neighbor, providing any number of supports, whether it be grocery store pickups, cleaning, cooking, paying bills, supervision, bathing support. Real quick story, and I think you folks can relate to this. My grandmother, many years ago, had really severe rheumatoid arthritis, was in perfect cognitive condition, but her body, in the later years, she was down to 60 pounds and bedridden. My grandfather was caring for her, but he himself had a stroke. So at that point, myself and my two younger brothers, with my dad working, my mom working, needed to rotate to provide support. So we lived with them and we rotated 2 days, 2 days living with them, and then the next brother would come in, and we were in college at the time, to support them. So whether it be dressing, toileting, bathing, we understood the demands. We were happy and honored to be able to support them, but um, on some small level, we understood the stress of caregiving. So, with that said, I can relate and connect to many of you and the supports that you're providing, but on a very small scale, because I also know that many of you don't have the luxury of having additional supports to rotate it in and out. So, thank you, Joe. Next slide. Now, who are we? The Elderly Affairs Division. It's going to start first with a federal law, the Older Americans Act of 1965. This is an important piece of law, federal act, that established and committed funds till this day for aging services. And it runs the myriad from home delivered meals to caregiver services, obviously. And through that law, the Older Americans Act, funds make its way to the community level, and I'll explain that shortly. In the Older Americans Act, establishes area agencies on aging, over 600 nationwide. And these area agencies on aging are established in the Older Americans Act as the local agencies to administer and deploy these programs and services using federal dollars. Elderly Affairs Division was established in 1973 as Oahu's Area Agency on Aging. And in that designation, we are able to receive federal, state, and city funds. We are tasked to provide information and referral on community services and programs. We are not an entitlement or welfare service, and our role really is gap filling services. We are services of last resort, and we do our best to be a community resource in identifying and referring individuals to appropriate programs and services depending on the needs and families of the family and individuals and what resources are available to them. Next slide, Joe.
Yep. And I'll explain what gap filling services mean a little bit later.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
I also want to mention, no matter where you live in the United States, there is an area agency on aging for your jurisdiction because it is kind of like a requirement nationwide.
And I'll add to what Joe says, as far as Hawaii's area agency on aging structure, each of our county governments have that designation of area agency on aging. So City and County of Honolulu, um, Maui County, Hawaii Island County governments, and Kauai all serve in that AAA role. Now, community resources. Formal services may be free or private paid. The less you pay, what you need to understand, and this is just life in general, right? The less you pay, the more paperwork, the more personal information, bureaucracies. It's a more intrusive process to access those services. So really, what we recommend is that, yeah, take a look at comprehensively as far as what services and programs are available. If there are informal supports, that is always the best route to go. If you have financial resources to support private pay, that's a better route to go as far as having options and quicker access to services. But with that said, uh, the funding and the structure of the aging network and the triple A's are there as a safety net and community support. So again, formal services, including government programs, many of our nonprofit agencies, for-profit businesses, and faith-based organizations are really the core organizations that support more formal types of services for kupuna, caregivers, and families. Okay, Joel, I'm going to hand it over to the real subject matter expert and give the floor to Joel.
Okay, so some of the challenges that we're seeing with people getting the community resources, well, first of all, a lot of people don't know about them. And a lot of it has to do with our culture also because, talking about aging issues is kind of taboo. So, a lot of times people grow up not even knowing things about how to interact with someone with dementia or what the different types of dementia are. People usually will only learn about it once it starts to really affect them. So, and at that point, they're kind of scrambling to learn things on a short time basis. So, that's one of the things we really want to change in society is how we think about aging, because a lot of times people are doing things last minute when it starts to affect them. The other main challenge is a lot of the services are unaffordable, especially in Hawaii, because the cost for care here is much higher than the mainland. And then there's also a reluctance to pay for services. So it's understandable because, a lot of seniors, they've been saving their whole lives, but the time to spend their savings is when they are seniors. So that's something they also have to remember. So, you're so used to saving money for decades, and then when you actually need to start spending it for this expensive care, it's hard for people because, it's a huge change in lifestyle, basically. And then there's also limited funding from the government for subsidized services, and that's kind of a growing issue with us because the senior population is increasing exponentially in relation to the amount of funding we get. Then another huge issue in Hawaii especially is location and geographical restrictions. So obviously in the more rural areas, it's much harder to get services because a lot of the workers don't want to go that far, or they're saying, because of logistic things like gasoline and just transportation, especially here with the traffic. So a lot of workers are reluctant to go very far from where they live. And then this is another growing issue is the shortage of workers. All of our providers, they have openings for jobs for people to provide services, but they can't find people, or they can't find people that are qualified enough. We're seeing a huge amount of skilled workers moving to the mainland because it's so expensive here. So I think the legislature should kind of focus on that more, which they kind of have with Kupuna Caregiver, but there's more things that need to be done to keep our skilled workers here in Hawaii. And then I would say the largest challenge is stubbornness, and everybody I think can relate to this. They know somebody who is older and stubborn and doesn't want to receive services. And again, that's related to culture because a lot of people who are stubborn, it comes from a sense of fear or unfamiliarity of the services. So, they're afraid that it's going to be really uncomfortable for them, or it's going to be too intrusive. So again, that's where we kind of have to change the mindset of society as far as what the services are, get people more familiarized with them, and then they can be more comfortable to, or at least know about the services, ask about it, and then be understanding of what it entails so that they'll be comfortable to accept the services.
Joe, this is Derek. I think a good example as far as maybe changing attitudes is the SNAP program. So there's a negative stigma attached to accessing, government support programs, especially related to food. So I think in educating ourselves and really getting rid of that negative, so that really false negative social stigma, that folks I think would be more open-minded to getting those supports and services if eligible and appropriate.
Yeah, and I also want to add on a lot of the reluctance for people to accept services. It does take a toll, not only financially but emotionally, especially for family members. We see this a lot because the family members or the neighbors or their friends, they're trying to get services for someone they see that needs help, but because our laws are arranged for self-determination. So even if the person is suffering, if they choose not to receive the services, we can't force it on them. So it's hard because the people around them, they're going to see the senior suffer, but then no one can really force services. I mean, we'll go out, we'll go talk to them, we'll go provide options, but if they're not willing to accept the services, it's just a continuing thing. And then a lot of times people are just worried. Lots of people are worried. And then it also costs the government money because several times, the government workers may have to go out to try and convince the person to get services. So, that's why I say stubbornness, I think, is our number one challenge to actually helping people because, yeah. Okay, so the Kupuna Care program is a state-funded program with our state taxes, and it's specific to Hawaii only. Other states may have their own programs that are similar, but this is the one that we have in Hawaii. So it is a gap-filling service, and it is intended for people 60 years and older. And to be eligible, they have to have impairments of what we call ADLs and IADLs, or a significantly reduced mental capacity. So activities of daily living is what the ADLs are, and that includes things like eating, bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, and mobility, so the ability to walk, get around. So if the person has deficiencies in two ADLs or IADLs, and they're not having all of their needs met, they could be eligible for our Kupuna Care program. So the instrumental activities of daily living are the activities that are not so much hands-on, so they're not as intense, but those include meal preparation, shopping, money management, using the phone, housework, using public transportation, and medication management. The only exception to this is our home delivered meals programs, which requires only, it's focused mainly on the ADLs, so it doesn't include the IADLs. So for home delivered meals, you have to be homebound and have deficiencies in two ADLs. So that's the only exception to this general rule for Kupuna Care services. So some of the Kupuna Care services currently contracted, at least for Honolulu County, is under personal care. We do have St. Francis, Ho'okele, Palolo Chinese Home, and KKV. For meals, we have Lanakila Pacific, Hawaii Meals on Wheels, Keiki Tukupuna, and Palolo Chinese Home. And then transportation, we have Catholic Charities Hawaii, Kukuakalihi Valley, and then attendant care, Palolo Chinese Home, and Ho'okele. So attendant care is kind of like having a home care aide where they can assist with things like um, help with transferring, meal preparation, escorting someone if they need to go to the doctor, things like that. Okay. And then homemaker services we have under PCH, St. Francis, and Hau'oli.
So this is Derek. We have a question. Um, are Kupuna Care services paid for by the Kupuna themselves?
No, Kupuna Care services are covered by the government funding. So those are not paid for by the client, although the client is given the opportunity to donate to the service provider, which could be used for the services. So in a way, they could be paying for the service, but it's not required. And it's going to be the money that is received is going to be handled directly by the service provider. So we at the government don't necessarily see that money at all. We just give the money to our providers, and they handle the donations or the contributions from the clients, and they're responsible for putting that back into the program to provide more services.
Joel, if I can break in here for a second. Those services are provided by those people you listed because they have contracts with the state. Some people are using home care that are totally separate from that, doing the same kind of services. I just want to kind of, make sure people understand the difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So under Kupuna Care, we do have to contract with providers to provide the services. So some of the providers we have are regular home care agencies who normally accept private pay, but the difference is we'll refer our clients to them, and then we'll pay them for the clients we refer them to them, but they also have their own other private pay services. And they may also have contracts with other government agencies such as Medicaid or maybe Medicare Advantage plans, things like that. So State Kupuna Caregiver Program, which was created maybe about 3 years ago, was specific to caregivers that were employed. And I think this was a good initiative because it did address the issue of workers in Hawaii. And the whole point of the program was to prevent skilled workers from having to quit their jobs or retire early so that they could provide care to their loved ones. And we do see this often where a lot of people will take early retirement because they have to care for their mother or father. So, these kinds of programs is very helpful because those really skilled people who are experts in their field, they can remain employed, and then we can provide assistance. The only drawback I would say is that the funding that they gave us was very limited, and then they also added a cap on the amount that could be spent per person. So because of that, on Oahu, we decided to go with adult daycare services only because the amount that they were really paying for was not enough to give respite for someone who's working 30 hours a week. So the only way that's really possible is through adult daycare services where a senior can go to a center and get supervision, meals, activities, and then the hourly cost is really significantly lower than in-home care costs. So the hourly cost for adult daycare, day health, ranges from maybe about $8 to $15 an hour, depending on the program and level of care. By comparison, in-home care services, you're looking at least $25 to $35 an hour. So being that, they set this limit on us and they wanted us to serve as much people as possible, the only way I could really see it working is through adult daycare services. And even at that level, we're not able to serve a lot of people. So, we're hoping that more can be done to increase the program.
And Joe, I know you've been a big proponent of adult daycare, adult day health centers. As far as, again, what you said, the level of care in relation to the funds connected to it. You mentioned during regular times, hopefully pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, you mentioned the daycare model really supporting obviously the social component and social needs of kupuna.
Yes, so that's another very important aspect. You look at the research in all types of social services, or isolation is becoming a huge problem, especially for the senior community. But it's not only limited to the senior community, but with more isolation, people become anxious. Their dementia gets worse. So and it's really hard for them. So they start to get worse faster. So we've seen this happen where people who start to attend a day program, they start to improve. I mean, the family will say, yes, she's much more responsive now that she's at home. And we think it's because she's socializing at the day program. It's like before she would just sit down and not say anything all day. But you're getting mental stimulation. You're also getting activities like physical exercise. And a lot of times they'll have parties. So just recently, one of our clients, they had to get reassessed, and then they were asking our staff, oh, does my mother have to be here too? Because there's a party at the daycare center for Halloween, and I don't want her to miss it. Yeah, so then, for that, she's like, oh, no, because the caregiver has power of attorney, so we don't really need your mother to be part of the assessment. You can just give us the information. So, that's very important for a lot of them once they start to attend the program, because, these centers will have, they celebrate the holidays, they have activities. Initially, it is very hard to get people to go because, again, our culture is very individualistic. So people always want individualistic type service. So they're always wanting someone to come to them. And, that's very American, which is nothing wrong with that, but it does cost more. So, and then it also leaves out the social component. And the social component is very important. So, yes, that's why I have been a strong proponent of adult day services. And even with our other programs, such as Meals on Wheels, where there is a social component, where the delivery driver volunteer can check up on the senior. However, because they are assigned a lot of seniors for their route, they can't stay with that person for very long. I mean, at the most, it's usually like 5 minutes to have a short conversation. So in those cases, it's more like a checkup. But if you go to an actual day center, you're there for several hours. You can socialize, talk to other people, participate in activities, especially holiday activities, which also will help cognitively because then you remember the times of the year, things like that. So, yeah.
So, Mapuana is asking, are there kupuna kupuna care providers on the other islands as well? And are there kupuna caregiver program on those islands as well?
Yes, so every agency on aging in Hawaii gets the same type of funding, but how they spend that funding is a little bit different. So you'd have to contact those respective agencies. The links you can find on our website, because our website, the Area Agency on Aging for our website, it is connected to the other 3 counties. So you should be able to find a link, or you can just go to the Executive Office on Aging, which is the funding agency of all 4 of the county area agencies on aging. But their programs may be a little different. And a lot of it, too, is because of the logistics. So, for instance, I'm originally from the Big Island, so I know in Hilo, I mean, when my grandmother had to go to daycare, there was only one in Hilo, and that was like for the whole side of that island. So, transportation to get there is very difficult. So the logistics and what's available on the neighbor islands may be significantly different than what we provide.
So I think as far as the Kapuna caregiver program, if I remember correctly, I believe Kauai is doing it similar as us as far as using the funds for adult daycare centers. Big Island and Maui, adult daycare centers too, but I think they might have some homemaker attendant care in there as well. But Kathy, I'm not sure if you're able to share what Joe is recommending, EOA's ADRC web link, and I think that'll take them uh, take our folks to their respective county AAAs.
Yeah, I can send that out to everybody after the program.
Okay, perfect.
I don't have it on the top of my head, but I'll send it out.
Okay, Joe, sorry, wanted to take some questions on the chat. For adult daycare, can transportation be arranged for seniors as well?
For most centers, they do not provide their own transportation, so it would have to be arranged separately by the family. So on Oahu, a lot of people do use handy van.
Yeah.
A few people may use Catholic Charities, but Catholic Charities is very limited as far as their scheduling, so it may be difficult to find them and schedule a time for their early pickup and late drop off, things like that. So, but most people, a lot of people will use a handy van for transportation to daycare services.
A couple of the facilities on the other islands have their own buses, and they pick up some of their folks too, but I can't remember which islands they were, because I visited those places as well. So just have to check with their EOA. Yeah.
So it would be helpful if the centers could provide their own transportation. I know Windward used to, but they had to stop that. I guess it was becoming too costly for them. So as of now, I don't think there's any provider on Oahu that has their own transportation. Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Hey, Kathy.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, Joe, the next question I know you know very well. Question from Allison. She's asking if adult daycare, adult day health programs for seniors, if they're operating during the COVID pandemic. So I do know this. It's a yes and a no, and I'll let you answer.
So as far as our providers, when COVID hit, most of them did close. The only ones that stayed open was Hau'oli and Franciscan Care. And then eventually, a few months later, most of them reopened also. But the ones that have not reopened that I'm aware of that were our providers was Seagull Schools in Kapolei and the state ones, so Maluhia and Leahi. Maluhia and Leahi, they told me they plan to reopen later next year, possibly early in the year. And then Seagulls, the way it seems right now from what I've heard is they probably may not reopen, which was a big loss because there's not much services on the Kapolei side. I think they were the only one in Kapolei. So the other one that also closed was Salvation Army, but I believe they intend to reopen also. I'm not sure what the timeline is for that. And they're located in the middle of town on Vineyard, so they have a really good location.
And Kuakini closed also.
Yeah, Kuakini closed, yeah.
And Joe and
that
Kathy, you folks can both attest to this, that the pandemic really has turned the operations of our adult daycare and adult day health centers upside down. And as far as sanitation, hygiene protocols, you folks, Kathy, had to mobilize really quickly and get those operations and protocols really quickly.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so going on to the caregiver-specific programs through our office, they are funded by federal Title III Older Americans Act funds, and caregiver programs are relatively more recent because they did not start off at the same time when the Older Americans Act started. So I think a lot of these programs maybe started maybe 20 years ago. And then the amount of funding that we get is very small compared to the other services we get funding for. So keeping that in mind, I think people who are caregivers, they really need to let themselves be seen more to the government so that we can advocate for more funding, which I know Kathy has been doing very well for us. And then So because of the funding limitations, we're only able to provide a few things, and some of it is like support groups and counseling, educational opportunities, caregiver case management. So support groups right now, we are giving some monies to Alzheimer's Association, which if you've been to the presentation by Dr. Bilaz, I think she showed information on all of different groups that they do. So part of that funding does come from this federal funds. I know Alzheimer's Association has their own funding also. So it's not to say that all of those groups and educational opportunities are funded by this program, but part of it is funded. And because of that, that's why they'll ask for a lot of personal information, because the federal government, they want to know what they're spending on. So that's why they'll ask for a lot of your name, birthday, things like that, because we have to report that to the government to show that the monies are being used for specific caregivers. The other group that we also pay for is Project Donna, which has been around for a very long time. Right now, they're doing their groups also, I think, virtually through Zoom. So that's another option you could look into. But I know for Alzheimer's Association, they have locations all around the island, and they always have educational opportunities, little seminars, similar to what Kathy's doing right here. And then for caregiver case management, currently we have a contract with Franciscan to provide case management for caregivers that care for elderly persons. And again, there is a registration process, things like that. And then there's also some money for respite, and the respite could include in-home type services, daycare type services, or services overnight in a facility. But it is very limited, and it is on a case-by-case basis. So, and to get that, you would have to get the case management through Franciscan Care. But I can share that information later also. And then the community-based caregiver programs. So these are programs that are not funded by us. So there's a lot of other agencies doing their own initiatives. And then there's also support groups. I know Kathy has her own support group also at Hau'oli. So those are the types of support groups we're not currently covering, but other agencies are paying for or sponsoring. And I know Windward Seniors Adult Daycare also has one. They sponsor support group, yeah. And then other educational opportunities. Kathy has been providing a lot of that also recently. It's kind of filling a gap because many years ago we used to do a caregiver conference, but we haven't been able to do that recently. So, you know, it's always helpful that other agencies can fill in these gaps in the community. Okay. Targeting and prioritization is a requirement with our program. So with our programs, income and assets are not required as the eligibility criteria. However, we are required to prioritize, and this becomes a bigger issue when the gap group population starts to grow. So, you know, it's very hard for us because we don't like having to tell people they can't get services, but in the reality is most of the people who apply for our services will not be able to get it because we are required to focus on the most neediest people. So this is why we do ask for income and assets now, because we have to use that information for prioritization. If people do get assessed by us and they don't provide that information, we can still complete the assessment, but you know they'll have to be placed on a wait list, and it's likely they won't be served because we won't have a prioritization score. You know, in a fantasy world, if we had unlimited funds, we wouldn't have to worry about that because we could serve everybody. But that's one of the tools that we have to use to prioritize. because of that, everybody, people who can afford to pay for services should look at other options. And a lot of people are hesitant to spend their money, like I mentioned before, especially if they've saved all their lives. But I think people have to realize that some people don't have savings at all, or they may have worked a low-paying job their whole life, so they don't have those kinds of things. So if you do have the income and assets to pay for services, I would suggest looking at the private options, because most likely they can offer more flexibility, more options in general that you can have available, and then also you won't have to provide so much personal information, whereas government programs, we need all of that information to justify the payment of the programs. So, a lot of people find that painful. A lot of our workers will tell us, yeah, a lot of seniors, they have to assess. They don't want to provide a lot of that information. But, in the end, if they really want the services, we need that information. So, that's kind of the trade-off.
Joel, so you touched upon something that's important. That for the good majority of our programs, there is a assessment component to, yeah, and especially and in some cases with our caregiver programs, some level of assessment with caregivers as well. You think you could quickly maybe explain the assessment process for folks to understand what's involved?
Yeah, so part of the requirements for the funding attached to our programs is we do have to provide an assessment. And the assessment, for instance, going back to Kupuna Care, where you do need the age and you do need the ADLs, IADLs. So that's where the assessment comes in to determine if the person has the ADLs and IDL impairments. And, we have to collect the person's birth date to determine their age eligibility. So normally we were required to do the assessments in the home because, there's a lot of things you can see in the home that you wouldn't be able to get over the phone. However, currently, because of the pandemic, we are doing a lot of the assessments over the phone. So, but before they do the assessment, the staff is required to do a screening and to see if the person has looked at other options first. Because we know that the process is painful for a lot of people, and if the person does have income and assets, they would probably be placed low on the wait list. So, that screening will help determine if it's really worth it for people to go through that painful assessment, or if it's better for them to look at other options, because it may be better that way. It may be faster, the services may be more comprehensive, things like that. So if you were to call us, our senior helpline, and you're asking for services, they're going to do a screening first to help give you options. And they're also going to ask if you have informal options, because a lot of people do have informal options, but they don't use it. And that's kind of a cultural thing too, because a lot of seniors say they don't want to burden their family, but our stance is that you should burden your family. I mean, if you've been providing for them, then they should provide for you too. So, when my grandparents were sick and ill, like all of us took turns taking care of them. And because of that, we never had to go ask for government assistance. So, and a lot of people are doing that. So, we're thankful for that. And that's part of Hawaii culture too, because of the multi-generational households. But we understand too that sometimes there isn't enough help. So for those people, when they're facing hardship and they can show that hardship and they're willing to show us, the income assets, things like that, then we can have them become eligible for our program also. So again, that's part of the screening process and the assessment process also. So. Mm-hmm. Uh, so this is kind of a screenshot I wanted to show you folks as far as the reason why we have to prioritize. And uh, this is a comparison of Medicaid's budget compared to our budget. So Medicaid in Hawaii for 2016, it was $2.2 billion. That's all taxpayer
Wow.
money. Yeah, so right now it's actually higher. I think it's like 2.4 just for Hawaii. And then you look at our budget, which is roughly still about the same, which is about total $7 million, and about half from the feds, half from the state. And then you can see our budget is less than 0.5% of Medicaid's. And then the other slide I want to show you is the number of seniors on Oahu. So in 2010, the number of people 60 years and older, there was almost 200,000. And in 2019, 234,000. So at any given time, our services are serving maybe up to 3,000 people at once. So that may sound like a lot, but when you look at the total number of seniors, it's just a drop in the bucket. So this is the reason why we're required to prioritize. There's no way we can serve everybody who needs assistance. So we do have to focus on the neediest. Yeah. And this is why also we have to provide more information on other options so that the rest of the community doesn't feel left out, like we're not providing help. I mean, we can provide help monetarily, but we try to help in other ways, which is through the information. So this is an example of our Kupuna Caregiver Program statistics, which to me, I still consider it a pilot project because the amount of people we can serve with the funding they give us was so small. I don't like it how the legislature or other people, they like to advertise it like it's such a life-saving program for everybody, but really the amount of people we can serve is so limited. So to me, it's a pilot project, and it's a good way to get data, though. So at least from the data, we can show the legislature the needs. And then if you really just look at the needs, you can see that most of the participants we are serving are in their 80s and 90s. So that's 80%. Even though the eligibility is for people 60 years and older, right now we're only serving about 3. Well, maybe I think it's only 2 now. But the ones in their 60s too, they're very high needs. They're usually the ones with early onset dementia, the ones who get severe dementia at young ages. So those are the ones that we're serving. So this is an example of showing the needs because, if we really did have enough money to serve a lot of people, the amount of age discrepancies wouldn't be this high. So you can see we're serving a lot of people, even with the ADLs and IDLs. So the average median is 10. They're having a total of 10, whereas the eligibility criteria is just to have 2. So obviously, if we're prioritizing the people with 10, there's still a lot of people who have a lot of ADLs and IDLs not being met. So, what about the people with 9 or 8 or 7? Those people are still in pretty bad shape, but we just don't have the funds to serve them. So these are good indicators for us to justify programs. And again, looking at the incomes criteria. So these are the average incomes of the participants, and it is just over the poverty level, which is around 1,200, I think, right now. So roughly, it's like 150% poverty level people that we're serving. And then even when you look at the caregivers, a lot of them are quite old, and some of them are elderly themselves. Most of the caregivers are in their 50s and 40s.
Joe, you could explain maybe for the group the difference between adult day. We've used both, right? Adult daycare center and adult day health. Maybe the difference between the two.
Basically, the difference is adult day health is a higher level of care. It's basically the same level as nursing home level care, or similar to nursing home level care, where you are required to have a RN on staff. So those are for people who may need medication management, uh, more specific types of assistance. Um, I think Kathy would be able to help with that since she's a RN.
Well,
Could you explain?
yeah, my facility is a social model. So we're not allowed to give medications. We don't do AccuChecks. We don't give insulin. We can remind the clients to take their medicines, but we can't actually give the medicines. The adult day health, they can do all of that, the insulin injections, stuff like that. But they have to do a lot of assessments, a lot of paperwork, and they're required to have, like you said, a nurse on board as well as CNAs.
Kathy, yeah, that's helpful for us to learn too. If I remember correctly, as far as the licensing, right? Adult daycare centers, DHS, right? For
Yeah.
adult day.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think now it's under Department of Health.
Department of Health. Yeah, you're right, Derek. It used to be that, but now it's under Department of Health.
Good to know.
Yeah, it's they contracted with Community Ties of America to do that, and then. But yeah, basically the difference is day health has a higher level of care
and a lot more regulations.
So some other resources I wanted to share with you folks. This is one of my favorite websites, National Institute on Aging. I know it sounds like a boring government website, which some people may think it is, but it does have a lot of user-friendly resources, and I think that's the key word, user-friendly. Let me just show their website.
There we go.
So one good resource that I found is their caregiver handbook for people with dementia, and it's really, really helpful. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, I know, I have the link on my website. So this is our website, elderlyaffairs.com. Under publications here. But while that's loading, let me just go through some parts of our website. This is the home, and recently I did post the fraud prevention guide, which is also another good resource done by the state. Unfortunately, they didn't make too much print copies, so you probably wouldn't be able to get one, but you can download the PDF, and that's from the Department of Attorney General. This is a huge issue in Hawaii right now, so that's something to be conscious of is elder exploitation, especially financially. So if you know elders, have a neighbor, have friends, have relatives, I would suggest keeping in touch with them to make sure that nothing fishy is going on, because it is easy to not notice these things. And in fact, we've seen this happen a lot, even with some of our staff. one of our coworkers' mother was tricked into buying a car for someone, and she didn't really even know until later on. But her mother lives alone, and she has dementia. So these kinds of things we're starting to see more often, and a lot of the authorities can't keep up. So the best thing to do is prevention.
Joe, I know with some of the fraud schemes, the lottery scams are a big one. Sweetheart scams are another. And I think a lot of the challenges is that many of the folks uh, uh, perpetuating these crimes are, out of country oftentimes,
Yeah.
especially with the lottery. So on the prosecution side, it's pretty much impossible. So the impact, that truly the only impact we have is not on the enforcement, but the education. So I think this is a good resource.
Yeah. And then going back to an earlier question to see the neighbor islands, if you go to our website and just go to the bottom, you'll see the links to the different islands. So for instance, and then they all have different colors. So that's how you can know if you're at another AAA. So for instance, the Big Island has blue. But if you're on a neighbor island or you're looking for services for someone on a neighbor island, just go to our website and then scroll to the bottom and you'll see the links. Okay. Let me see. Go back to the presentation. So our senior handbook is one of our ways of providing information to more people than let's see. So yeah, this is our Senior Information and Assistance Handbook. It's been produced for many decades actually, but more recently, within the last 10 years, it has evolved from a resource of service provider listings to more of a descriptive and almost educational tool. So let me. So we do have that on our website also. If you go under publications and then senior handbook. Okay, yeah, so here's an example. So what we've been doing is trying to put more definitions of terms and things like that in the handbook so that, and this is all based on the most frequently asked questions that we get through the senior helpline. So, we're trying to respond to that. What is the community asking? So in response to that, we are always modifying our handbook, adding more information. And it does come to a point where it's so much words, a lot of people don't want to look at it. So, but we do understand that some people are readers. So, everybody learns in different ways. So for those who are willing to read the book, I think they can learn a lot. And this is why more professionals are starting to use our book. Also, social workers, discharge planners from hospitals, they really rely on our book. But to the average person, sometimes it may be too much. So that's why we try to have other options also. People can always call our senior helpline to talk to someone, to get some of that information if they want to talk. And then another option too is videos. We don't put out videos, but I do have links on our website to videos that were done by the Kupuna Education Center many years ago. And those are really helpful too. So for people who don't like to read, a lot of I don't know if you know Cullen Hayashida, but he used to host the show and he had all these different types of topics. So I did put links to a few that I thought were more trendy. So like how to access low-income senior apartments, adult daycare centers, talks about what they are. Financial fitness, care homes and foster homes, that's another popular question. That's very confusing because there's so many different types. But if you go to, again, publications, scroll all the way to the bottom of our website, and you can click on where it says Kupuna Education Center. Oh, I guess it doesn't support. You gotta use Chrome. Okay. Yeah. Oh, here I have Chrome open. Yeah. Yeah. So
Well,
these
you're
are
doing-
actually really old.
Go ahead.
These. Oh, yeah. I gotta switch my thing. Hold on.
I want to tell you, just reiterate, the booklet is amazing. And I remember when I first started my business, I fought to get included in that booklet because it was so good and it was so well accepted. So you will get a copy of that in the packet I send you after the series is over.
Okay. Yeah. So if you click on that link, it'll bring up all the old episodes that they had. And even though they're really old, like from 7 years ago, they're all very helpful information. Especially for people who don't like to read. If you just want to watch something. They actually used to play this on Olalo. I don't know if they still do, but see, here's some like on nutrition, taking care of your medications, hoarding and cluttering, reverse
Adult day
mortgages.
centers.
Yes, adult day centers. That one I have linked on the front page of our website because people always ask. Yeah. So that's some of the information. Okay. Okay, so some recommendations. It's always better to plan ahead, prepare for the worst, but expect the best. That's always a good saying. Always, you might want to look into advanced healthcare directives, wills, trusts, power of attorneys, things like that before major life incidents happen. You may want to look into long-term care insurance. This is mainly for people who are under 55 because once you go over that age, it gets pretty expensive to the point where it's not really worth it. And then again, long-term care insurance is more for people who have a lot of assets. So, if you don't have a lot of assets, it may not be worth it. It's really meant as a tool for people to preserve their assets in the event that they may need to go to a long-term care institution, because a lot of people, they can spend down their money pretty quickly once they go into a nursing home, which can cost like around $10,000 a month. But if you don't have a lot of money anyway, like only $50,000, $100,000 saved up, I don't think it would be worth it. It would just make sense to spend out your money and then switch over to Medicaid after that. But it's always good to talk to experts, financial planners, lawyers, people who are experienced in the field. And then also, absolutely talk to your family and friends about your wishes. Use any available informal supports if you have. To me, I think using your informal supports is always the easiest way to go because it's your family and friends. It's easier to ask them for help, and they're more willing, I think, would be more willing to provide that assistance. And they know who you are, so they know what you like, what you don't like, rather than going through the more formal routes, applying for services, because it always takes time, no matter who you're applying to, whether it's government, charities, nonprofit agencies. There's always going to be paperwork. There's always going to be time to fill out all of that stuff. um, and then learn about the services, not only for your loved one, but for yourself as well, because, eventually we're all going to get older. And it's always good information to have, to know, just in case, because it's not only your family, your friends, it could be your neighbors, could be a coworker. You could always provide advice or tell them where to go, where to look for things, things like that. It's always good for people to get educated and have more knowledge, no matter what. The other one is to take care of yourself, especially for caregivers who may not have a lot of informal supports, who are the sole caregiver. Those are the ones that we really want to watch out for, because it's really easy to, to burn out, basically. And a lot of these people, we hear a lot of stories of the caregivers passing away before the care recipients. And, that's a real thing because of the stress that they have to endure. So you always want to take care of yourself. And if it becomes too much, you always have to look for other assistance, because, if you're not there to help your care recipient, then, then that person has to end up being taken care of by the government. So it's not as good as if family was taken care of. So the other thing I want to also focus on is, again, the isolation issue and promoting social interaction, staying engaged and active. And that's not only for the seniors, but also for yourselves. It's really easy for caregivers to become isolated, and that stress can change a person. They become very resentful. They get a lot of emotions, and unfortunately, some of that feelings can turn into very bad situations where people convince themselves that they deserve to get their parents' house or things like that. So we always see this happen with elder abuse, and sometimes those people were really good caregivers, but because of the situation and because they didn't get help, it turns into an elder abuse issue. And financial exploitation, things like that. So we want to avoid that from happening. So the best way to do that is to keep up social interaction, to get more information, to see what services are available, making sure that you take care of yourself, go to the doctor for yourself also, and then participate and get involved. So there is some sort of advocacy to show the government that you are there, you need help, you are a caregiver. And then I understand not everybody is very vocal like Kathy Wyatt, but at least by attending these sessions and providing some information, we can collect that and provide that to the government. So, I'm a data person, so I'm always collecting data, and then I try to use that data to show a picture or a story, and then we can use that to justify support for our programs, So, just even if you're not out there going to the legislature and yelling at the senators, you can still participate in all of these different programs and just provide some of your information, and then that gets collected into a report. So, that can be helpful in some ways also. So, just being active, participating in different programs, having yourself listed somewhere on some data report or something. You know, it sounds boring and not useful, but it actually can be.
Joe, we have someone in the audience asking, is there a ballpark income asset level that we really look at where uh, if it's above that that mark, it wouldn't be worthwhile for her or someone to even apply? I know the answer is not a easy one because it's the priority scoring I know done by you and the grants management team after receiving the assessment from our staff. It's a comprehensive uh, needs assessment with many different factors, of which includes, yes, income and assets. But you think you could elaborate on how your priority assessment, what components you look at?
Yeah, so mainly we do look at income and assets, but we also look at another huge factor is level of care. If the person has a really high level of care where they could be almost ready to be placed into a nursing home, and the family has been providing that high level of care, we acknowledge that because in the long run you may be saving the government money by preventing that person from going onto Medicaid. Because that person may still have a lot of assets, but even if you have $100,000, that could be spent within 1 year at a nursing home. And then after that, that person has to go on to Medicaid. So, it's not an easy answer. But I would say if you're facing hardship, we take that into account. And the hardship could either be because you're providing nursing home level care to your care recipient, or you just don't have enough money to pay for services. There's a lot of different factors. And then we also look at the number of informal supports. So a lot of the people that we do provide that are caregivers, they may be the only caregiver. They say their brothers and sisters don't want to help my mother, so I'm the only one. We take that into account too. And especially if the person is still working, because it's always better for you to continue working to save, work towards your own retirement, your Social Security, your Medicare, because you're going to need that when you retire. So it's really not worth you quitting your job to become the full-time caregiver, because in the long run, it's going to cost the government even more money, because when it's your time to retire, you're going to have to end up on welfare. So, there's a lot of different factors, but mainly we do look at income and assets, but level of care is also very important. And then the number of informal supports that the person has. So, but I would say just in general, if you're facing some kind of hardship, give us a call and then we can see if there's other options for you, because it also depends on the type of service and your situation, because the services that we have are not consistent. Depending on where you live, there may be certain things available. So we may take that into account also. So it's always better to kind of call and maybe just get a consultation from our workers.
Joe, another question. Which adult day centers offer respite care for 2 weeks to a month at a time for caregivers to have, an opportunity to recover? I do know it sounds like to me that's probably more overnight respite
No,
service.
I don't think that's what she's asking.
Mhm.
Uh,
Kathy.
But that we do offer respite for daycare. And I think that's what the question was. Most of us do offer, short-term attendance for that sort of thing. It just depends. You have to just call around. And I will tell everybody that I have a list of daycare centers that are part of the Hawaii Adult Daycare Association. So if you need a list, if you're interested in doing something like that, let me know and I can send you the list.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay.
Yeah, normally a lot of centers may not offer that because they're concerned about having their slots filled, right? So, whenever you have a daycare center, you have to plan ahead because there's a certain requirement for the number of staff you need to be at the center for the number of participants. So that's why they always have to plan ahead. And it's kind of hard to do that when people only want short-term stays. So, from what I've heard from the providers, some people are reluctant to offer that because of that reason, and also because of that reason, the ones that do, it may be a little bit higher cost. Yeah.
Most of us right now are not full because Joel, just to let you know, because of the COVID, we've a lot of folks are keeping their loved ones at home. But a lot of us still have spaces available if it's needed anytime soon, just to let you know.
Okay. Yeah, so I think for that, maybe contact Kathy because she is involved with the organization of all the different daycare providers.
Joe, do you want to open it up for any questions? I know we're at the
Yeah,
10.
I think we're at the end of our presentation, so we can accept questions.
You want me to unmute everybody? Oh, here we go. You're getting a lot of thank yous. Okay, are you reading that, Joel? Derek? Well, if nobody has any burning questions right now, you can always get a hold of me and you will have that booklet that Joel showed you in your mailing when I send it, if I have your entire address and name. Don't forget that. Let's see. Here's a question from Lenny. Will assessments resume by social workers by elderly? Oops, I lost it. Hold on a second.
Yeah, well, I
There
think
you
Joe mentioned this, that our assessments have never ceased. What we were needing to do was pivot to a telephonic assessment process, although that really is not ideal because we can't make assessment with eyes, our ears, nose sometimes. That we felt that really this has been a shift as far as the industry and aging services, where we want to limit exposure and risk to our older adults. So we still maintain telephonic assessments. And I think once the community, oh, go ahead, Joe.
I think there's some confusion because I think some of our staff was telling people that they weren't going to do assessments for certain services because the wait lists were so long. I think that's specific to homemaker services and attendant care. Also because we've been having provider issues. So yeah, the wait list for that one is we're not able to pull people off because the providers don't have staffing. So yeah, I've heard there's some frustration about that, but it's that one is provider based though. There's just not enough workers. So I think we have to go talk to our staff, but I think some of them were telling callers for specific services we weren't providing assessments. You guys want to hear another joke?
Yeah, I was going to tell you, Joel, it hasn't been boring, but please do share a joke.
Good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. Okay, my last joke for the day. A man and woman have been married for more than 60 years. They had shared everything and talked about everything. They had kept no secrets from each other except for an old shoebox that the woman kept in her closet that she had cautioned her husband never to open or ask about. Being happily married for all these years, he had never thought anything about the box. But one day, the woman got very sick and the doctor said she would not recover. In trying to sort out their affairs, the man found the shoebox and took it to his wife's bedside. She agreed it was time that he should know what was in the box. When he opened it, he found a small ball of thread, some crochet needles, 2 crochet dolls, and a stack of money totaling over $100,000. With his confused and shocked look, the wife spoke softly. When we were to be married, my grandmother told me the secret of a happy marriage was never to argue. She told me that if I ever got angry with you, I should just keep quiet and crochet a doll. The old man was so moved and tears started to roll down his face. There were only 2 perfectly made dolls in the box, meaning that she had only been angry with him 2 times in all of their 60 years of marriage. Struggling to speak over his emotions, "Oh, my love," he said, "that explains the dolls, but what about all of this money? Where did that come from?" "Oh, that," she said with a straight face, "that's all the money I made from selling the dolls."
Oh, that's good.
Kathy, I think we're at risk of losing Joel, the entertainment comedy world. So yeah. Need to be
Yeah.
ready.
We'll see you on stage, dear. If there's no other questions, I want to thank Joel and Derek so much for this information. I've gotten so many positive comments on the chat room about the wonderful information and resources and humor, Joel. But if you have any other questions that you want to send to them, I just send them to me and I will forward them and get the answers for you. And I can share their emails with you. I had someone ask for those and I can get those back to you if you're interested. But thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate you being here because, like I said before, it's so hard to get the information out to everybody. And this is one way to spread the word. So thank you very much. And everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Don't eat too much or eat as much as you want. I don't care. I'm gonna eat a lot. But have a great week and see you next Saturday for our final in this series with Rick Tabor. So thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Kathy,
Thank
Rick,
you for
let's
having us.
connect. Thank you. Joel, good job. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kathy.
You're welcome.